There are moments in life when everything feels like it's working against us. No matter how hard we try, success seems just out of reach, and the temptation to give up grows stronger with each failure. But what if the struggle itself is shaping us into something greater? What if every challenge, every setback, is forging us just like fire and steel, to become stronger than we ever imagined? This is not just a lesson, it's a truth that those who refuse to surrender come to understand. The road may be long, and the obstacles may seem endless, but those who persist, who rise each time they fall, will one day stand at the peak, looking back only to realize that every hardship was a step leading them to success. Now, let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between rolling hills and lush forests, there lived a young boy named Ethan. One day, Ethan sat by the riverbank, using a wooden stick to draw meaningless shapes on the ground. His eyes reflected boredom. He had tried many things, but nothing kept his interest for long. Studying was dull, martial arts were too exhausting, and helping his father farm was unbearable under the scorching sun. Ethan couldn't understand how adults managed to persist with their work day after day without feeling bored. Not far from there, on the edge of town, stood a small blacksmith shop run by an old man named Thomas. Every day, he worked tirelessly at the forge, lifting his heavy hammer and striking down on the glowing hot metal. The sharp clang-clang of metal hitting metal echoed throughout the town, blending with the waves of heat rising from the forge. Everyone in town respected Thomas because the swords, tools, and horseshoes he forged were strong and sharp. One day, curiosity led Ethan into the blacksmith shop. He watched as Thomas hammered a glowing red piece of metal. The heat made Ethan squint, and he hesitated before asking, "Mr. Thomas, why do you keep hammering that piece of metal?" Thomas paused and smiled kindly. "If I don't forge it, it will remain just a useless lump of metal. But if I patiently heat and hammer it, it will become a strong sword. It's the same with people. If we don't challenge ourselves, we will never grow." Ethan frowned, watching the piece of metal change shape. "But metal is so hard. How can you change it?" Thomas rested his hammer on the anvil and replied, "I use fire to soften it, then I use the hammer to shape it. This process must be repeated many times. If I give up after just one strike, it will never become a sword." Ethan was silent for a moment, thinking about those words. He realized he was just like the piece of metal. He gave up too easily when faced with difficulties. If he didn't try and persevere, he would never achieve anything meaningful. From that day on, Ethan started to change. He no longer gave up so easily. When he struggled with his studies, he thought of the unfinished sword. When he grew tired of martial arts training, he remembered Thomas's relentless hammering. Slowly, he learned to persist, and with each passing day, he felt himself becoming stronger. As time went on, Ethan noticed his own progress. Not only did his martial arts skills improve, but his grades also started rising. Ethan's change also affected his family. Previously, he would help his father on the farm, but quickly grow bored and give up. But now, he was more patient when he faced challenges. He thought of Thomas striking the hot metal. Slowly, his father began to notice his son's growth. Over time, Ethan gradually grew up and became a high school student admired by many. One day, while studying under the large tree in the town square, a group of classmates approached him. "Ethan, you've been working so hard lately," one friend remarked. "You used to give up halfway, but now it's different," another added. Ethan smiled, remembering Thomas's lesson. He shared the story of the sword with his friends, explaining that every challenge they faced was like the blacksmith's hammer, forging them into stronger individuals. His friends listened with fascination, and some even began to change their way of thinking. One day, Ethan returned to the blacksmith shop to visit Thomas. Thomas smiled. "Have you learned your lesson?" Ethan nodded. "I've learned that to become strong, I must accept challenges and never give up. Like this sword, if it hadn't endured fire and hammering, it would never have become sharp." Thomas smiled. "You've grown, but remember, life will always present new challenges." Ethan felt determination fill his heart. He no longer feared difficulties, but welcomed them. Every time you face hardship, think of the sword and continue forging yourself. And so, day by day, Ethan continued to forge himself just like a sword, becoming sharper and stronger. Life is like a raw piece of iron that only becomes sharp after enduring intense heat and powerful strikes. Ethan was once a boy who easily gave up, but through perseverance, he forged himself, turning challenges into motivation to rise higher. No success comes without struggle, and no strong person has ever grown without hardship. Ethan's story is not just about a boy who changed. It is proof of the power of persistence. If you never give up, you will eventually find your own path.